A penthouse suite at the Aurelian in New York costs over $25,000 a night. It's a price tag reserved for billionaires' royalty and those with secrets to keep. For tech millionaire Adrian Thorne, it was the perfect place to treat his mistress, Chloe Carter, to a weekend of forbidden luxury in Suite 1812. He believed he had planned every detail, covered every track. But he missed one crucial detail. He didn't know that his wife, Amelia Thorne, the woman whose inheritance helped build his empire, had booked the grand royal penthouse directly, silently, fatefully above them. The air in the Bentley Mulsanne was thick with the scent of expensive leather and Chloe Carter's Chanel No. 5. Outside, the rain-slicked streets of Manhattan blurred into a Monet of brake lights and neon. Inside, Adrian Thorne rested a hand on her knee, his thumb tracing idle, possessive circles on the fabric of her dress. He was a man accustomed to getting what he wanted, and for the last 6 months, what he wanted was Chloe. Nervous, Adrian asked his voice, a low, confident rumble that always seemed to calm her. Chloe turned from the window, her wide hazel eyes reflecting the city's ambition. A little. The Aurelian. Adrian, it's legendary. Are you sure about this? I'm sure about us, he corrected, leaning in to kiss her. It was a practiced, perfect kiss, the kind that erased doubt. Amelia thinks I'm at a tech summit in Zurich. Her father's old cronies are honoring him with some posthumous award. She'll be buried in family obligations all weekend. We're ghosts. Chloe wanted to believe him. At 26, she was a senior data analyst at his company, Thorne Innovations. She had been dazzled by his intellect, his power, and the focused attention he had shown her. He made her feel seen in a way no one else ever had. He spoke of a future, a life beyond the sterile, passionless marriage he described with his wife Amelia, a marriage he'd claimed that was now nothing more than a business arrangement. The Bentley purred to a stop beneath the ornate green copper awning of the Aurelian Hotel. A doorman in a topcoat and white gloves materialized, opening Chloe's door as if she were royalty. The lobby was a breathtaking cathedral of commerce and comfort. A colossal crystal chandelier, rumored to have been salvaged from a Habsburg palace, dripped light onto floors of polished marble. The air hummed with the quiet, confident murmur of the truly wealthy. Adrian, ever the commander, handled everything. He didn't go to the main check-in desk. Instead, a discreetly dressed woman with a tablet met them by a marble column. Mr. Harrison, she greeted him using the alias he'd booked under. Welcome back to the Aurelian. The celestial suite is prepared for you. Room 1812. Your luggage will be brought up momentarily. She handed him a sleek black keycard without another word. No paperwork, no IDs, no fuss. The privacy of the Aurelian's guests was its most coveted luxury. As they ascended in the private wood-paneled elevator, Chloe felt a thrill mixed with a potent dose of guilt. She had seen photos of Amelia Thorne at company galas, a woman of intimidating elegance and poise, with cool blue eyes and a pedigree that stretched back to the Mayflower. She was the Thorne in Thorne Innovations, having provided the seed money from her family's vast shipping fortune that had launched Adrian's brilliant idea into a billion-dollar reality. What's she like? Chloe asked the question, escaping before she could stop it. Adrian's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Amelia, she's organized, efficient. She runs the household like she runs a board meeting. Everything has its place. Everything is scheduled. There's no room for spontaneity, for passion. He turned to face Chloe, cupping her face in his hands. With you, I feel alive. With her, I feel like I'm managing an asset." The elevator doors opened directly into the vestibule of their suite. It was less a room and more an apartment. A sprawling living area with floor-to-ceiling windows offered a jaw-dropping panorama of Central Park. A bottle of Dom Perignon was chilling in a silver bucket next to 2 flutes and a bouquet of Chloe's favorite flowers, white orchids, sat on a glass coffee table. "How did you know?" she whispered, touching one of the delicate petals. "I pay attention," Adrian said, his voice husky, as he wrapped his arms around her from behind. "I know everything about you, Chloe Carter." He began kissing her neck, and the last of her reservations melted away under the warmth of his touch and the sheer opulence surrounding them. She was living a fantasy. For the weekend, this gilded cage was hers. They made love with an urgency, fueled by the forbidden nature of their tryst. The city lights twinkling below them, like a carpet of scattered diamonds. Later, wrapped in plush hotel robes, they stood by the window, champagne in hand. To us, Adrian toasted, clinking his glass against hers. To a future where we don't have to hide. Chloe smiled, a genuine, hopeful smile. She looked out at the view, at the endless expanse of the city. She felt on top of the world, high above the noise, the judgment, the complications. She had no way of knowing that she wasn't on top of the world at all. She wasn't even at the top of the hotel. High above Suite 1812, in the grand royal penthouse that occupied the entire floor. Above them, another woman was unpacking. She too stood by a window looking down at the same park, holding not a glass of champagne, but a slim leather-bound file. Amelia Thorne was not in Zurich. She wasn't at a family function. She was here. And she was listening, not with her ears, but with a cold, calculated certainty that had been building for months. The faint, percussive thud of a bass line from a song playing in the suite below traveled almost imperceptibly through the floorboards, a confirmation that felt as final as a gavel strike. Her husband and his mistress had arrived, and her own plan was just beginning. Amelia Thorne did not believe in coincidence. Coincidence was a luxury for the unprepared, a narrative for the naive. Her world, the one she had meticulously curated alongside her husband, was built on strategy data and the unflinching acknowledgement of human fallibility, especially Adrian's. The suspicion had started not with a lipstick stain or a late night at the office, but with a discrepancy in a financial report. A subaccount for corporate travel and entertainment, usually predictable, had begun to show erratic, high-value expenditures. A $5,000 dinner at a restaurant Adrian despised. A charge for a suite at a boutique hotel in Soho on a night he was supposedly working late. They were small waves in a vast ocean of capital, but Amelia had built her family's fortune by charting the tides. She didn't confront him. A confrontation would only yield prettier lies, more elaborate deceptions. Adrian was a brilliant innovator, but a predictable liar. He would gaslight and deflect, making her feel paranoid and controlling. No, Amelia did not want an argument. She wanted irrefutable truth. So she had hired Marcus Thorne. He was not a gumshoe from a film noir. Thorne was a discreet, terrifyingly efficient corporate investigator who specialized in what he called asset protection and risk mitigation for high-net-worth individuals. He was a ghost with a camera and access to systems that made privacy a quaint, outdated notion. For 2 months, Marcus fed her a steady stream of information. Encrypted emails would arrive at 3 a.m., containing photos, locations, and timelines. The subject of his investigation: Chloe Carter. Amelia learned everything. She knew Chloe's coffee order, her student loan debt, the name of her cat. She saw photos of her, laughing with Adrian in a secluded corner of a wine bar, of them holding hands during a walk along the Hudson, of a kiss shared in the back of his Bentley. Each photo was a small, cold stone dropped into the pit of her stomach. There was pain, of course, a deep, seismic crack in the foundation of their 20-year marriage. But as the evidence mounted, the pain began to crystallize into something harder, colder, and far more useful resolve. The final piece had arrived 2 days ago, an itinerary, a booking at the Aurelian Hotel under the name James Harrison. Suite 1812, the Celestial Suite, for this coming weekend. The weekend he was supposed to be in Zurich. Amelia looked at the booking at the name of the suite. Celestial. The irony was so thick it was almost suffocating. Adrian reaching for the heavens with his little dalliance. It was then that her plan took shape. It wasn't enough to catch him. It wasn't enough to divorce him. A quiet, civilized divorce would allow him to paint her as the cold, frigid wife he couldn't connect with anymore. It would allow him to rewrite history and walk away with half of an empire her money had started. No, he had chosen to humiliate her in private. She would choose to dismantle him in public. She made a call, not to a lawyer, not yet. She called the Aurelian's general manager, a man whose daughter's tuition at NYU was funded by a Thorne family charitable grant. Mr. Dubois. "It's Amelia Thorne," she had said, her voice calm and level. "I need a favor. I require the Grand Royal Penthouse for the weekend. An impromptu decision." There was a brief, flustered pause on the other end. Mrs. Thorne, of course. But the Penthouse is typically booked months, if not years, in Adthorne. "I'm aware," Amelia said, letting the silence hang in the air. "I trust you can find a way to accommodate me. Consider it a personal request." It had taken less than an hour for him to call back. The Penthouse was hers. Now, standing in the palatial living room of the Grand Royal Penthouse, she felt a strange, chilling calm. The suite was magnificent, a showcase of quiet, old-world luxury that made the Celestial Suite below seem like a trendy, nouveau riche afterthought. Here the art on the walls was real, a small Degas sketch, a Miro lithograph. A grand piano stood in one corner. A private terrace offered a god's-eye view of the city. Her single suitcase sat on a luggage rack neatly unpacked by a hotel attendant. She had brought 3 things of importance. The first was the leather-bound file from Marcus Thorne, filled with every damning piece of evidence. The second was a custom-made listening device, a highly sensitive parabolic microphone that, when placed against the floor in just the right spot, could pick up vibrations and muffled conversations from the suite directly below. It was a gift from Marcus. "Just in case," he'd said. The third item was a copy of her prenuptial agreement. She didn't need to read it. She knew it by heart. She had helped her father's lawyers draft it 20 years ago. There was a standard infidelity clause, but there was also a lesser-known, far more potent one, a morals clause tied directly to the reputation of Thorne Innovations. Any action by either partner that brought public scandal or financial disrepute upon the company was grounds for immediate punitive forfeiture of shares. Her father had insisted on it. A man's character is his collateral, Amelia, he had told her. Never forget that. She walked over to the center of the vast Persian rug, knelt, and placed the listening device against the floor. Switching it on, she put on the connected headphones. At first, there was only static. Then a faint beat emerged. Music. A pop song she didn't recognize. Then a clearer sound, the high, bright peal of a woman's laughter. Chloe's laughter. It was a sound full of joy and abandon. A single hot tear escaped her eye and traced a path down her cheek. She did not wipe it away. She let it fall. It was the last tear she would allow herself to shed for Adrian Thorne. The grief was real, but it was now a fuel. She took off the headphones. She didn't need to hear any more. They were here. They were happy. They were living in a fantasy world built on her money and his lies. Amelia stood up, her posture ramrod straight. She walked to the wet bar, ignoring the chilled champagne. She poured herself a small glass of Macallan 25 neat. She took a slow, deliberate sip, the fiery liquid a stark contrast to the ice in her veins. The architect was in place. She had the blueprints for Adrian's destruction. Now all she had to do was wait for the perfect moment to pull down the entire building. By Saturday morning, the fantasy had begun to show its seams. For Chloe, the initial euphoria had given way to a subtle gnawing unease. Adrian, who had been so attentive and present the night before, was now distant. His focus tethered to the glowing screen of his phone. He had been scrolling through it since he woke up, a small, worried furrow in his brow. "Everything okay?" Chloe asked, propping herself up on an elbow. She was wearing one of his soft cashmere sweaters, feeling small and hopeful in the cavernous bed. "Just a market fluctuation in Singapore." "Nothing to worry your pretty little head about?" he said, not looking up. The comment was meant to be reassuring, but it felt condescending. He had never spoken to her like that at the office, where he'd praised her analytical mind. Here in this new role as mistress, it seemed her intelligence was an accessory to be admired, not engaged with. They ordered room service for breakfast. As the waiter wheeled in the cart laden with silver cloches and fresh juices, Chloe noticed Adrian's eyes dart towards the door, a flicker of paranoia in his gaze. He signed the check as Mr. Harrison with a flourish, but his hand was not quite steady. "I was thinking," Chloe said, "trying to reclaim the romance, we could go for a walk in the park later. Or maybe visit the Met. You said you'd take me to see the Sargent portraits." "Too risky," Adrian said immediately, shaking his head as he sliced into a grapefruit. "Too many people. Someone might recognize me." "Recognize us," she corrected softly. "Yes, us," he amended, but the damage was done. He saw this as his risk, his problem. She was a complication to be managed, not a partner to be protected. The first real crack appeared around noon. Adrian's personal phone, the one he'd sworn was only for her, and his most trusted contacts, buzzed violently on the nightstand. The caller ID read, David Chen. "I have to take this," Adrian said, his tone clipped. He walked into the massive marble bathroom and closed the door, but the soundproofing in the suite was not as absolute as he thought. Chloe could hear the strained tenor of his voice. David Chen was Adrian's right-hand man at Thorne Innovations, the COO, a genius logistician who kept the company running while Adrian played the visionary. "David, now's not a good time." "No, I'm not in Zurich. It's complicated. Look, the European expansion can wait until Monday. What do you mean the board is getting restless? Who's been talking to them?" Chloe sat on the edge of the bed, the pretense of their romantic bubble shattering around her. This wasn't an escape for him. It was just a different, more luxurious office from which he was still managing his complicated life. A life that she was beginning to understand she was not truly a part of. She was a secret, a diversion, a weekend getaway. When Adrian emerged from the bathroom, his face was pale. The charm was gone, replaced by a raw, stressed out frustration. "Problems at work?" Chloe asked gently. "Nothing I can't handle," he snapped, then immediately softened his tone. "I'm sorry, darling. It's just a lot of pressure. This deal in Europe is make or break." He ran a hand through his hair. "Let's just stay in. We can watch movies, order whatever we want. Just you and me. The world can wait." But the world was already creeping in. He tried to feign relaxation, but he checked his phone every 5 minutes. He poured them more champagne, but his laughter was forced. Chloe felt a growing sense of claustrophobia. The magnificent suite now felt like a key, its floor-to-ceiling windows, showing her a world she couldn't be a part of with him. She found herself thinking about Amelia again. What was she really like? Adrian painted her as a cold, calculating woman, but she was also the co-founder of his empire. A woman like that didn't get where she was by being a passive bystander. The story Adrian had constructed about his marriage was starting to feel edited, a narrative crafted for a specific audience, her. The breaking point came in the late afternoon. They were in the living area, a classic film playing unheeded on the massive screen. Adrian's phone buzzed again. This time it was an email. He glanced at the screen, and all the color drained from his face. He stood up so abruptly, he nearly knocked over his champagne flute. "What is it?" Chloe asked, alarmed. He didn't answer. He stared at his phone, his eyes wide with a terror she had never seen before. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost. He slowly turned his head and looked around the room at the windows at the door, as if expecting someone to burst through. "Adrian, you're scaring me. What's wrong?" He finally looked at her, but his eyes seemed to look straight through her. "We have to leave," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Leave? What are you talking about? What happened?" "Don't ask questions, Chloe. Just get dressed. Pack your things. Now." The command was harsh, panicked. The suave millionaire was gone, replaced by a cornered animal. All the romance, all the whispered promises of a future together, evaporated in the sterile, fear-laced air of the suite. The cracks in the facade had given way, revealing the rotten framework beneath. And as Chloe rushed to pack her bag, a single terrifying thought echoed in her mind. What in God's name had been in that email? Upstairs, Amelia Thorne lowered the parabolic microphone from her ear. She hadn't been able to make out the words, but she had heard the sudden shift in tone, Adrian's panicked voice, the sound of drawers opening and closing in a hurry. The email had been delivered. The first stone had been thrown, and from the sound of it, it had just shattered Adrian's perfect little world. The email that had eviscerated Adrian Thorne's composure was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. It had not come from a recognizable address, but from a randomly generated encrypted Proton mail account. There was no text in the body of the message. There was only a subject line and a single attached image. The subject line read, "A lovely view from the Aurelian." Don't you think the image was a high-resolution photograph? It showed Adrian and Chloe in the hotel lobby from the previous evening. They were standing near the marble column waiting for the concierge. Adrian's back was mostly to the camera, but Chloe was in perfect profile, gazing up at him with an expression of pure adoration. Adrian's hand was resting on the small of her back in a gesture that was unmistakably intimate. The photo was time-stamped. It had been taken less than 24 hours ago. But that wasn't the most terrifying part. The photo had been taken from an elevated angle from the mezzanine balcony that overlooked the lobby. It was a perspective that suggested the photographer wasn't just a random guest, but someone who had been watching them, waiting for them. Adrian's mind raced, cycling through a Rolodex of potential enemies. Was it a business rival trying to get leverage for the European deal? Had one of Amelia's family members, protective of the Thorn name, hired someone to follow him? Or was it simpler and more sordid, a professional blackmailer who had gotten lucky? His mind, a finely tuned instrument for calculating risk and strategy, was now flooded with a paralyzing static of paranoia. The one possibility he did not for a single second entertain was that the architect of his terror was sleeping peacefully in a four-poster bed directly above his head. Amelia was in Zurich, drowning in familial grief and duty. That was a fixed point in his universe. Her absence was the foundation upon which this entire weekend was built. "Adrian, talk to me," Chloe pleaded. Pulling on her coat, her voice was shaking. "Who sent that? What did it say?" "It's nothing." He lied, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He shoved his phone into his pocket, trying to regain control. "It's a bluff. A competitor trying to rattle me before the merger talks. It's business, Chloe. It has nothing to do with you." But his eyes betrayed him. He kept glancing at the suite's door, at the silent telephone on the desk. He felt exposed, watched. The luxurious suite had transformed into a fishbowl. "Business." Chloe shot back, her fear turning to anger. "You looked like you saw a ghost. You told me to pack to run. This doesn't feel like business, Adrian. This feels like we got caught." "We didn't get caught," he insisted, his voice rising. He grabbed her by the arms, his grip tighter than he intended. "Nobody knows we're here. This is a targeted corporate attack. They're using our situation as leverage. The best thing we can do is act normal. Stay calm." His attempt to sound commanding was completely undermined by the sheen of sweat on his forehead. He was telling her to stay calm while he was visibly imploding. He released her and began to pace the room like a caged tiger. "Harrison, they don't know my real name. They know the room number. How could they know the room number?" He stopped, his eyes widening. The staff. Someone on staff must have been paid off. He was spiraling, casting blame in every direction to avoid looking at the simple truth: his own recklessness had consequences. Chloe watched him, a cold dread washing over her. This was the man who had promised her a future, a life of passion and authenticity. This panicked, paranoid stranger was not that man. She was seeing the real Adrian Thorn for the first time, not the confident CEO or the charming lover, but a man terrified of losing control. "I want to go home," she said, her voice small but firm. "No." Adrian's response was sharp, almost brutal. "We can't leave. If someone is watching, leaving in a panic is the worst thing we can do. It confirms their leverage. We stay. We finish the weekend. We act as if nothing is wrong. We project strength. On Monday, my security team will sweep this hotel from top to bottom and find out who's behind this." He was talking about his life, his problems, his strategy. She was a piece on his chessboard, a pawn he was now moving to protect his king. Defeated and scared, Chloe sank onto the sofa. The dream was well and truly over. She was trapped in a luxury prison with a man who was unraveling before her very eyes. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the distant sound of a swoon on the street below and the frantic, silent whirring of Adrian Thorn's mind as he tried and failed to calculate his way out of a trap he didn't even understand. He was fighting a ghost, a digital phantom who had his name, his location, and his secret. He thought he was playing a game of corporate espionage. He had no idea he was a pawn in a war of marital revenge. Upstairs, Amelia placed a "Do Not Disturb" sign on her door. She ordered a light lunch from room service, a lobster salad, and a glass of Sancerre. She ate slowly, methodically, savoring every bite. She did not need a listening device to know what was happening below. She had written the script herself. Panic, accusations, lies. The slow, corrosive acid of fear eating away at their illicit fantasy. The first act of her play was over, and it had gone perfectly. Part 5. The Unraveling. The next 24 hours were a slow-motion descent into psychological hell. Adrian's attempt to project strength was a catastrophic failure. He was a prisoner in his own gilded getaway, and his paranoia poisoned every moment. He drew the heavy blackout curtains, plunging the suite into a perpetual gloomy twilight. He forbade Chloe from opening the door, insisting that all communication go through him. When room service arrived, he would peer through the peephole for a long minute before cautiously cracking the door open, his body blocking the view into the room. He made a series of frantic, whispered phone calls to his head of security, a gruff ex-Mossad agent named Avi, and to his lawyer. Chloe could only catch snippets of the conversations, a complete digital sweep. "I want to know who has access to the guest manifest." "No, I can't tell you why. Just find them, Avi." Yes, it's a level 10 priority. He was trying to treat a wound of the heart with the tools of corporate warfare. He was searching for hackers and spies, for moles and blackmailers. His mind, so brilliant at identifying market vulnerabilities, was completely blind to the emotional betrayal he himself had authored. For Chloe, the fear had begun to curdle into a cold, hard resentment. She was no longer a participant in a romance. She was collateral damage in Adrian's crisis. He barely spoke to her, and when he did, it was with the distracted air of a general issuing orders to a subordinate. On Saturday evening, he tried to salvage the situation with a grand gesture. He had the hotel set up a private extravagant dinner in the sweet lobster steak and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than her rent. But the atmosphere was funereal. Adrian just pushed the food around his plate, his eyes constantly darting towards his phone, which he had placed face down on the table like a dormant grenade. "I'm sorry this weekend has been complicated," he said, his attempt at an apology sounding more like a CEO's press release. "Is that what this is? Complicated?" Chloe asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "It feels more like a hostage situation." "Don't be dramatic, Chloe." "Dramatic?" Her voice cracked. "I'm trapped in a hotel room with a man who is having a nervous breakdown because of a single email. You won't tell me what's happening. You won't let me leave. You told me this weekend was about us, but the second things get difficult, us disappears. It's all about you, your company, your secrets. You don't understand the kind of pressure I'm under." He shot back, his voice rising. "Everything I've built is on the line. Everything we've built." "You mean a voice?" in Chloe's head corrected her, and the thought was so jarring it silenced her. Adrian always said, I built this company. The pressure I'm under. But that wasn't true. Amelia's inheritance, her family name, her social connections. They weren't just the seed. They were the soil the entire empire had grown in. This realization sparked a new rebellious impulse in Chloe. While Adrian was distracted by another hushed phone call in the bedroom, she opened her laptop. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed a name into the search bar: Amelia DeWitt Thorne. The results were not what she expected. She had imagined a society wife, a relic of old money content to chair charity luncheons. The woman on the screen was a powerhouse. There were articles from Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. The quiet architect of the Thorne Empire. Amelia Thorne's Midas touch in philanthropic investing. There were photos of her not at galas, but at construction sites for the schools her foundation had built on panels at the World Economic Forum, and shaking hands with global leaders. Her eyes in the photos were not cold, but fiercely intelligent, sharp and focused. She radiated a quiet, formidable competence that made Adrian's blustering charm seem flimsy and theatrical in comparison. Chloe scrolled deeper, a knot of ice forming in her stomach. She found articles about their marriage society pieces from years ago. They were described as a power couple, a perfect fusion of old money and new tech. She read about Amelia's background, her degree in art history and economics from Yale, her position on the board of Thorne Innovations. A position on the board. Adrian had told her Amelia had no interest in the business, that she found it vulgar. Another lie. Everything he had told her about his wife was a lie. He hadn't just edited the story, he had fabricated it from whole cloth. He had painted Amelia as a weak, detached woman to make himself seem like a trapped victim and to make Chloe feel like his savior. The truth was sickeningly clear. Amelia Thorne was not the cage. She was the co-architect of the castle. Chloe felt a wave of profound shame wash over her. She wasn't a romantic heroine rescuing a misunderstood genius. She was a cliché. The younger woman, the office subordinate, a temporary distraction for a powerful man having a midlife crisis. She had allowed herself to be blinded by luxury and flattery, ignoring the glaring red flags because the fantasy was so intoxicating. She closed the laptop, the soft click echoing in the silent suite. The man in the next room was not her partner. He was her boss, a liar and a cheat. And his wife was not a woman to be trifled with. A new kind of fear took root in Chloe's heart. It was no longer a fear of being caught. It was the fear of what a woman like Amelia Thorne would be capable of if or when she discovered the truth. Chloe suddenly felt an overwhelming urge to get as far away from Adrian Thorne and his web of lies as possible. She looked at the door, her gilded cage, and for the first time she began to formulate a plan of her own. She just needed a way out. On Sunday morning, the atmosphere in Suite 1812 was thick with unspoken truths. Adrian was exhausted, his paranoia having burned through his reserves of energy. He had finally succumbed to a restless sleep, his phone clutched in his hand like a talisman. Chloe, however, had been awake all night, her mind racing. The illusion was shattered. She saw Adrian for what he was, and she saw herself for the fool she had been. Her primary emotion was no longer fear, but a simmering righteous anger. Anger at Adrian for his deception and at herself for her gullibility. She needed to get out. But Adrian's command not to leave had been absolute. A direct confrontation would be explosive and unpredictable. She needed an opportunity, a moment of distraction. It came in the form of a call from the hotel spa. "Good morning, Ms. Carter," a polite voice chirped. "This is a courtesy call to confirm your 10 a.m. appointment for the rejuvenation package at the Aurelian Spa." Chloe froze. She hadn't made any appointment. "I think you have the wrong person. The appointment was made for you, ma'am. A gift from Mr. Harrison. A gift. A transparent, pathetic attempt by Adrian to placate her after their fight the night before. He must have arranged it yesterday before the world came crashing down. An idea desperate and daring began to form in Chloe's mind. This was her chance. Yes, of course, Chloe said, her voice smooth and collected. Thank you for the reminder. I'll be down at 10. She dressed quietly, choosing a simple, elegant pantsuit. It felt like armor. When Adrian stirred, she was ready. I'm going down to the spa. She announced her tone, leaving no room for argument. You booked it for me. Remember. Adrian looked flustered, having clearly forgotten. Chloe. I don't think that's a good idea. I have been locked in this room for 36 hours. Adrian, she said, her voice like ice. I am going. If your blackmailer wants to take a photo of me in a bathrobe, let them. Frankly, I don't care anymore. This is your mess. I'm going to get a massage. Before he could protest further, she walked out, closing the door firmly behind her. The freedom of the hotel hallway was intoxicating. The Aurelian Spa was an oasis of tranquility, all muted lighting, trickling water, and the scent of eucalyptus. After changing into a robe, she was led to a quiet, private waiting lounge to await her therapist. The lounge was empty, save for one other woman, sitting in a high-backed armchair, calmly reading a book. The woman looked up as Chloe entered, her blue eyes clear and assessing. She was impossibly elegant, even in a simple white robe. Her posture was perfect, her silver blonde hair pulled back in a chic, effortless chignon. It was Amelia Thorne. Chloe's blood ran cold. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was impossible. A cosmic, terrifying coincidence. She wanted to turn and run, but her feet were rooted to the floor. Amelia closed her book, placing it on the table beside her. She gave Chloe a small, serene smile that did not reach her eyes. Chloe Carter, I presume. Please sit down. Don't be alarmed. This is not a chance encounter. Chloe's mind went blank. She sank into the armchair opposite Amelia, her body moving on autopilot. You're supposed to be in Zurich. Chloe stammered the words, sounding feeble and ridiculous. Adrian is a creature of habit. His lies are rarely creative. Amelia said, her voice calm and measured, utterly devoid of the hysteria Chloe might have expected. I've known about you for 2 months, 3 weeks and 4 days. I know you prefer oat milk in your lattes, and that you've been working on the Pegasus expansion algorithm for Adrian. An impressive piece of work, by the way. Chloe stared, speechless. This wasn't a confrontation. It felt like a corporate takeover. I imagine you're wondering why I'm here, Amelia continued, folding her hands in her lap. You probably think I'm here to scream, to cry, to throw a drink in your face. That would be a waste of good scotch and my time. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze intense. I am here to offer you a business proposition. A business proposition. You've had the last day and a half to see the real Adrian, haven't you? Not the charming CEO, but the paranoid, self-serving man-child who is currently hiding under the covers upstairs. He promised you a future, didn't he? Let me be clear. There is no future. He will never leave me. Not because he loves me, but because our finances are so intractably interwoven that separating them would be the financial equivalent of unscrambling an egg. Our prenup would leave him with his salary and a pittance. I would retain controlling interest in the company. He would be ruined. Every word was a hard fact, delivered with surgical precision. He has done this before. Chloe, Amelia added a flicker of something not pain but weariness in her eyes. You are simply the latest in a series of distractions. The difference is this time he got sloppy. This time he used company funds. Amelia slid a thin tablet across the table. On the screen was a spreadsheet. It detailed charges for jewelry, for weekends away, for rent on a small apartment in Tribeca, all funneled through the corporate T&E account Chloe had seen him use. It was embezzlement, plain and simple. "This is your out," Amelia said. "I am calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I will be exercising the morals clause in our agreement. I have enough to remove him, but your testimony would make it undeniable. It would turn a corporate maneuver into a public execution." Chloe was stunned. "My testimony? Why would I help you?" "Because your other option is to go down with him," Amelia stated plainly. "When this breaks, and it will break, the board will launch a full investigation. They will find the payments. They will find you. You'll be named in the lawsuit. You'll be fired, blacklisted in the tech industry. Adrian will throw you under the bus to save himself, claiming you extorted him. He will ruin you, Chloe. I, on the other hand, am prepared to be generous." She named a number. A severance package that would not just clear Chloe's student debt, but set her up for life. Sign a non-disclosure agreement and provide a sworn statement to my lawyer detailing Adrian's use of company resources to facilitate your affair. In return, you get this package a letter of recommendation for your work on Pegasus, and you disappear. You get to start over clean. He gets what he deserves. Chloe looked from the tablet to Amelia's unblinking eyes. She saw the trap she was in, laid bare. Adrian's trap of lies, and now Amelia's trap of logic. But Amelia's trap was also an escape hatch. She thought of Adrian's panic, his lies, his condescension. She thought of the formidable woman sitting before her, an architect of vengeance who wielded facts and figures like weapons. There was no contest. "What do you need me to do?" Chloe asked, her voice steady for the first time in days. A slow, satisfied smile finally touched Amelia Thorne's lips. It was the smile of a chess master who has just said, "Checkmate." "First," Amelia said, picking up her book, "you go back upstairs and you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Let him think he's still in control." Returning to Suite 1812 was the most difficult performance of Chloe's life. She had to feign a relaxed post-spa glow, masking the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The power dynamic had shifted entirely. She was no longer Adrian's pawn. She was Amelia's knight. Feeling better, Adrian asked, relieved to see her return without incident. "Much," Chloe said, giving him a placid smile. "You were right. It was silly to be so worried." For the rest of the day, she played the part of the mollified mistress. She allowed him to believe his pathetic attempt at a spa day had worked. She watched movies with him, let him hold her hand, and listened to his renewed hollow promises about their future. Every word from his mouth was now transparently false, and it took all her willpower not to laugh in his face. He was a condemned man, enjoying his last meal, and he had no idea. That evening, Chloe received a text from an unknown number. 8:45 a.m. Tomorrow. Black car waiting on 58th Street. My lawyer's name is Arthur Jennings. He will have your statement ready to sign. Be ready. The next morning, Chloe dressed with meticulous care. As Adrian showered, she packed her small bag. When he emerged, wrapped in a towel, she was standing by the door. "I'm heading out early," she said, her voice breezy. "A friend of mine is in town, and I promised I'd meet her for breakfast before she flies out. It was a weak lie, but his mind was already on the battles he expected to fight at the office. "All right," he said, distracted. "I'll call you later this afternoon once I've sorted out this mess." He leaned in to kiss her, but she turned her head, so his lips landed on her cheek. "Have a good day at the office, Adrian," she said. The words were laced with an irony so profound it was almost painful. She walked out of Suite 1812 without looking back. She did not take the main elevator. Following Amelia's texted instructions, she took a service elevator down to the ground floor, bypassing the lobby entirely and emerging onto a side street. The black car was waiting exactly where promised. An hour later, Adrian Thorne walked into the main boardroom of Thorne Innovations on the 50th floor of their midtown skyscraper. He had been summoned by an urgent, non-negotiable email from Amelia's assistant. He assumed it was about the European deal David Chen had been panicking about. He was ready for a fight, armed with projections and market analysis. He was not prepared for what he saw. The entire board was present, their faces grim and unreadable. His partner, David Chen, sat at the far end of the table, refusing to meet his eye. And at the head of the table in his chair sat Amelia. She looked radiant, dressed in a sharp navy blue power suit. She was the picture of calm authority. "Adrian." "Thank you for joining us," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the silent room. "Please take a seat." The only empty chair was one usually reserved for junior executives halfway down the table. Humiliated, he sat. "We're not here to discuss the European expansion," Amelia began, her voice cutting through the tension. "We're here to discuss a serious breach of corporate governance and the flagrant misuse of company assets." On the massive screen at the front of the room, where Adrian expected to see a stock chart, an image appeared. It was the photo from the hotel lobby. Then another. And another. A slideshow of his entire affair with Chloe Carter, curated by Marcus Thorne. Whispers and shocked murmurs filled the room. Adrian shot to his feet. "What is the meaning of this? This is a private matter. It has no place. It became a corporate matter." "Adrian." Amelia interrupted, her voice like steel when you started funding it with corporate money. The slideshow changed to a spreadsheet. It was the same one Amelia had shown Chloe. Line by line, it detailed every expenditure. The jewelry, the secret apartment, the weekend at the Aurelian, every dollar tied to his affair, embezzled from their shareholders. David Chen finally spoke, his voice heavy with disappointment. "We've cross-referenced the expense reports with your corporate card, Adrian. It's all there. The board has been presented with irrefutable evidence." Adrian was speechless, his face ashen. He looked at Amelia, truly seeing her for the first time in years, not as his wife, but as his adversary, his executioner. She had planned this, every step. The Zurich story, the hotel, the board meeting. It was a perfectly executed corporate coup disguised as marital revenge. And finally, Amelia said, delivering the coup de grace, "We have a sworn statement from the employee involved." The boardroom door opened. Arthur Jennings, a lawyer with a shark's smile, walked in. And behind him was Chloe Carter. If Adrian had looked like he'd seen a ghost in the hotel, he now looked like a man whose soul had been ripped from his body. He stared at Chloe, his mouth agape. He saw no fear in her eyes, no regret. Only a cold, quiet resolve. She had not been his partner in crime. She had been the star witness for the prosecution. Chloe did not look at Adrian. She looked directly at the board members. Mr. Thorne pursued a relationship with me under false pretenses and used company resources to do so. She stated her voice clear and strong. I was led to believe his marriage was over and that his intentions were honorable. I have provided Mr. Jennings with all the evidence I have to that effect. It was over. Adrian sank back into his chair, a broken man. He was ruined. Publicly, professionally, personally. Utterly and completely dismantled by the two women he had so profoundly underestimated. The board voted unanimously. Adrian Thorne was removed as CEO and chairman of Thorne Innovations, effective immediately. A motion was passed to pursue legal action to reclaim the embezzled funds and press charges. Amelia Thorne was named interim CEO. In the aftermath, Adrian became a pariah. His name a cautionary tale, whispered in the boardrooms and country clubs where he was once revered. He faced a mountain of legal fees and public disgrace. Chloe Carter, as promised, disappeared. With the generous severance and a clean break, she moved to the West Coast, took a new name, and started a new life far from the toxic glamour of New York. She never looked back. Amelia thrived. Freed from the dead weight of her husband's deceit, she steered Thorne Innovations to even greater heights, her leadership lauded as visionary and decisive. She had not just reclaimed her company, she had reclaimed her life. She had been betrayed in the most personal way, but she had refused to be a victim. Instead, she became the architect of her own justice, proving that the most dangerous woman is not the one who cries, but the one who plans. In the end, Adrian Thorne's greatest mistake wasn't the affair itself, but his complete underestimation of the two women he wronged. He saw his wife Amelia as a relic of the past, and his mistress Chloe as a plaything for the future. He never realized that one was the keeper of his history, and the other would become the catalyst for his downfall. It's a chilling reminder that betrayal often breeds the most unexpected and powerful alliances. The Penthouse wasn't just a room above his, it was a war room where a quiet, calculated revenge was being plotted. What do you think? Was Amelia's revenge justified, or did she go too far? Could Chloe have done anything differently? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story as compelling as we did, don't forget to hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a good story of justice, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more true-life dramas that show what really happens when secrets and lies fall apart. Thanks for listening. "5 years ago, David Miller buried the memory of his wife. Not in a grave, but in the far recesses of his mind, a place reserved for inconvenient truths and forgotten promises. To the world, Amelia Williams had simply vanished, a quiet, unassuming woman who walked out of her perfect Brooklyn brownstone one rainy Tuesday and never came back. David told everyone it was a tragedy, a breakdown. He grieved publicly, while privately celebrating his freedom with the woman he'd been seeing for years. But memories don't stay buried forever. And Amelia Williams wasn't the woman anyone remembered. Today, in the shimmering towers of Manhattan, a new queen reigns over $1 billion empire, and she's finally ready to come home. The air in their Brooklyn brownstone always smelled of lemon polish and David's ambition. Amelia Williams, at 32, was the curator of this perfect life. Her days were a meticulously choreographed ballet of managing their home hosting dinner parties for David's architectural firm and ensuring his world ran with the silent, flawless efficiency of a Swiss watch. She had given up her own budding career in botanical research to become the silent partner in the David Miller success story. It was a sacrifice she had made willingly, believing her love was the foundation upon which he built his dreams. David Miller was a man carved from charm and ambition. He was the golden boy at Sterling and Vance Architecture, a rising star whose designs were lauded for their sleek modernist lines. He'd look at Amelia across a crowded room, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners, and people would sigh. "They're the perfect couple," they'd whisper. "She's his rock." But lately the rock had begun to feel the strain of invisible cracks. It started subtly. The late nights at the office became more frequent, punctuated by the sterile excuse of pushing a deadline for the Hudson Yards project. His phone, once left casually on the nightstand, was now perpetually screen down or in his pocket. When she touched his arm as he slept, he would flinch away, a gesture so small yet so thunderously loud in the quiet of their shared life. The scent of another woman had begun to cling to his clothes, not a cheap perfume, but something expensive and subtle like jasmine and sandalwood. When she'd asked about it once, he'd laughed it off. "Oh, that's probably Chloe Vance from the office. Her perfume is so strong it practically follows you home." Chloe Vance. The name hung in the air between them. She was a junior partner at the firm, a woman David described as brilliantly ruthless. Amelia had met her a few times at company events. Chloe was everything Amelia wasn't, sharp-edged, dressed in tailored pantsuits, her lipstick a slash of defiant red. She had a way of looking at David that made Amelia's skin prickle. A look that bypassed professional admiration and landed squarely in the realm of predatory possession. One Tuesday evening, the rain was lashing against the windows, a miserable, persistent drizzle that matched the feeling in Amelia's gut. David was late again. She had prepared his favorite meal, braised short ribs that had been slow cooking for 6 hours. The table was set with their wedding china. At 9 p.m., he still wasn't home. She called his cell. It went straight to voicemail. She called the office. The night security guard answered his voice, bored. "No, ma'am. Everyone from the executive floor left hours ago. Mr. Miller signed out at 5:02 p.m. The lie was a cold, sharp stone in her stomach. 5:02 p.m. He had been gone for 4 hours. 4 hours of unaccounted time. She waited the silence of the house pressing in on her. The short ribs grew cold. The candles she had lit sputtered and died. When he finally walked in just after 11 p.m., his hair was damp, and his shirt was slightly rumpled. He didn't look tired from work. He had the flushed, energized look of a man who had just been thoroughly alive. "Sorry I'm so late," he said, shrugging off his trench coat. The traffic was an absolute nightmare. Amelia stood by the dining table, her hands clasped in front of her. "The security guard at your office said you left at 5. David froze, his back to her. The carefully constructed mask of the loving husband flickered. For a moment she saw the stranger underneath. He turned slowly, his expression shifting from surprise to annoyance. "You called my office. Amy, what is wrong with you? Are you checking up on me now?" He snapped, his voice cold. "Where were you, David?" She asked, her own voice, barely a whisper. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of performative frustration. "I went for a drink with the team to decompress. Chloe, Mark, a few others. Is that a crime? I needed to blow off some steam. This Hudson Yards project is killing me." He walked past her, past the elaborate uneaten dinner, and headed for the stairs. I'm exhausted. I'm going to take a shower. He didn't notice the single perfect water ring on the mahogany side table left by a cold glass he hadn't touched. He didn't see the way her hands were trembling. He didn't see the light in her eyes, the one that had always shone for him, finally beginning to dim. As the water from his shower started to run, Amelia stood alone in the cold dining room, the beautiful life she had curated, now feeling like nothing more than a well-appointed prison. And she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that the key to this prison was no longer in her hands. The next few days were a blur of strained politeness. David acted as if nothing had happened, becoming overly affectionate in a way that felt cloying and false. He brought her flowers, praised her cooking, and talked animatedly about their future. A future that now sounded to Amelia like a script from a hollow play. She moved through her days on autopilot, a ghost in her own home. The unspoken truth, a chasm widening between them. The breaking point didn't come with a dramatic scream, but with a quiet click of a laptop. It was a Saturday morning. David was out claiming he had an early site visit. Amelia was tidying his home office, a space she rarely entered. His laptop was open on the desk, asleep. Her hand hovered over the trackpad, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Don't do it," a voice in her head warned. "You can't unsee what you find." But she had to know. She touched the pad, and the screen blinked to life. He hadn't even bothered to lock it. His email was open. And there it was. An entire thread with Chloe Vance. It wasn't just about work. There were pictures from a recent business trip to Chicago, pictures of them laughing in a hotel bar, a selfie with their heads close together, Chloe's red lipstick staining the rim of a wine glass. Then she saw the hotel confirmations, the Four Seasons, the Peninsula, all booked for 2. The dates corresponded perfectly with every late night, every business trip, every time he had come home smelling of jasmine and lies. The final email sent just last night was from Chloe. Subject tonight. Message. I can still feel you. I can't believe you went home to her after that. How much longer do we have to pretend, D, I want our life to start? I love you. The words blurred through Amelia's tears. I love you. He had told Amelia he loved her that very morning before he left. The hypocrisy was a physical blow knocking the air from her lungs. She scrolled further, a glutton for punishment, and found what truly broke her. It was a message from David to Chloe sent a month ago. I know. Just be patient. It's complicated. Leaving Amy isn't simple. She's dependent. She has nothing without me. No career, no real ambition. It sounds cruel, but her whole world is this house. I have to handle it delicately. But I promise you our future is what matters. You're my future. She has nothing without me. The words echoed in the silent room, stripping away 15 years of love and sacrifice, rendering her life down to a single, pathetic sentence. She wasn't his partner. She was a complication, a dependent, an obstacle to be handled delicately. When David returned that afternoon, whistling as he came through the door, he found her sitting in his office chair, the laptop screen glowing in front of her. The color drained from his face when he saw what she was looking at. "Amy, I can explain," he stammered, the charm finally failing him. "Can you?" Her voice was eerily calm, devoid of the hysteria he was clearly expecting. "Can you explain how the woman who gave up her PhD so you could finish your master's has no ambition?" Can you explain how the woman who networked tirelessly at your side, charming your bosses and clients, is a complication? He flinched. You don't understand the context. Oh, I understand the context perfectly, she said, standing up. For the first time, she felt taller than him. The context is that you are a coward and a liar. You built your career on my back, and now that you're successful, you want to trade in the foundation for a newer, shinier model. His defensiveness curdled into cruelty. When cornered, David Miller didn't apologize. He attacked. Oh, spare me the martyr act, Amelia. He sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. You loved playing the perfect wife. You loved the parties, the house, the money. Don't pretend this was some great sacrifice. What were you going to do? Sell homemade potpourri at a farmer's market? I gave you this life, and frankly, it's become boring. You've become boring. You have no fire, no edge. Chloe challenges me. She understands my world. You just arrange the flowers in it. Each word was a meticulously aimed dart, and they all hit their mark. He wasn't just admitting his infidelity. He was assassinating her character, her worth, her entire identity as he had shaped it. He was telling her that she was, in fact, nothing without him. Something inside Amelia snapped, not in a loud, explosive way, but in a quiet, final severing of a cord. The love she had felt for him, which had already been dying, turned to ash. In its place, a cold, hard resolve began to form. She didn't scream or cry. She simply looked at him, her eyes clear and steady. "Thank you, David," she said, her voice chillingly serene. "You've made everything perfectly clear." She walked out of the office, leaving him standing there amidst the digital debris of his betrayal. She went upstairs to their bedroom, the room they had shared for a decade, and opened her closet. She didn't pack the designer dresses he had bought her, or the jewelry he had gifted her, as apologies. She packed a small duffel bag with a few pairs of old jeans, some sweaters, her hiking boots, and a worn, leather-bound journal filled with her grandmother's botanical recipes and drawings. It was the one piece of her old life, the life before David, that she had kept. As the rain began to fall again, Amelia Williams walked out of the Brooklyn brownstone. She didn't look back. She had no destination in mind, only a direction away. Away from the man who thought she was nothing, and toward the woman she had forgotten she could be. Amelia drove for 17 hours, stopping only for gas and black coffee. The city skyline receded in her rearview mirror, replaced by the endless, hypnotic stretch of the interstate. She was running on adrenaline and grief, the engines hum a monotonous drone against the cacophony of David's cruel words replaying in her mind. Boring. Dependent. Nothing without me. She had no plan, no destination, until a memory surfaced from the depths of her childhood, her grandmother's cottage. It was a place she hadn't seen in 20 years, a small, forgotten property on a rugged stretch of the Oregon coast, bequeathed to her when her grandmother passed. She and David had once talked of selling it, but the paperwork was too complicated, the market too slow. It had sat there, derelict and waiting. With a new, desperate sense of purpose, she rerouted her GPS. 3 days later, she pulled onto a gravel road nearly swallowed by overgrown ferns and towering pines. The cottage was even more dilapidated than she remembered. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged, and a thick carpet of moss covered the roof shingles. But it was hers. It was a place untouched by David's influence, a sanctuary of her own making. The first few weeks were a descent into despair. The isolation was absolute, broken only by the cry of gulls and the relentless crashing of the Pacific waves against the cliffs below. There was no internet, no cell service. The silence forced her to confront the gaping wound in her life. She wept for the love she'd lost for the woman she'd allowed herself to become. She chopped wood with blistered hands, repaired the leaky roof with tar and sheer will, and learned to live with the ghosts of her past. Slowly, painfully, the wilderness outside began to heal the wilderness within. She started spending her days in her grandmother's overgrown garden. It was a chaotic jungle of weeds, but beneath the neglect, the bones were still there. Hardy rose bushes, lavender that had gone wild, and a mysterious, resilient herb garden her grandmother had cultivated with an almost mystical reverence. It was there, with her hands buried in the cool, damp earth, that Amelia started to come back to life. She found her grandmother's old journals in a dusty trunk in the attic. They were filled not just with recipes for jams and pies, but with detailed instructions for creating salves, tinctures, and facial oils from the plants in the garden. Her grandmother had been a natural chemist, a woman who understood the secrets held within leaves and petals. Amelia's dormant passion for botany, the one she had sacrificed for David's career, reawakened with a fierce intensity. She started experimenting, following the old recipes, and then improvising, using her forgotten knowledge of plant biology to refine them. She created a soothing balm from calendula and chamomile that healed the cuts on her hands. She developed a facial oil from rosehip and sea buckthorn that brought a glow back to her own grief-stricken face. She wasn't trying to build a business. She was trying to save herself. The act of creation was a balm for her soul. The cottage began to fill with the scent of drying herbs and essential oils, a fragrance of healing and renewal. One day, needing supplies from the nearest small town, she stumbled upon a local farmer's market. On a whim, she packed a small basket with a dozen jars of her coastal renewal balm. She hand-wrote the labels on simple brown paper. She didn't expect to sell anything, but a woman with weathered skin from years of fishing bought a jar, desperate for something to soothe her chapped hands. The following week, the woman returned and bought 5 more. "I don't know what you put in this stuff," she said, her voice filled with awe, "but it's like magic. My hands haven't felt this good in years. You should sell this online." The idea was a tiny spark. For the first time in months, Amelia felt a flicker of something other than pain ambition. Around the same time, a thick envelope arrived at the cottage's rusty mailbox, forwarded from her old address. It was from a law firm. David had filed for divorce. The papers were cold and clinical, citing irreconcilable differences and offering her a paltry settlement, a sum so insultingly small it was clear he assumed she was desperate and would take anything. Included was a letter from her own family's lawyer, a kind elderly man named Samuel Thompson, who had managed her parents' estate. He had been trying to reach her for months. "My dear Amelia," his letter read, "I am so sorry for what you are going through. Please know that this settlement offer is an insult. Your contribution to David's success was significant. Do not sign anything. Please call me." Finding a signal required a 20-minute hike to the top of a cliff overlooking the ocean. When she finally got through to Mr. Thompson, his voice was a welcome anchor of sanity. "Amelia, thank God. We've all been so worried," he said. "Forget David. We will handle him. Tell me, what have you been doing?" She hesitated, then told him everything: the cottage, the garden, the balms. She expected him to dismiss it as a hobby. Instead, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "My wife has terrible eczema," he said, finally, his voice thoughtful. "She's tried every cream on the market. Nothing works. Send me a sample of what you've made. Send me everything you've made. Amelia did. A week later, Mr. Thompson called back. His voice was electric with excitement. "Amelia," he said, "my wife's skin is clearing up for the first time in a decade. This isn't just a hobby. What you have here is a miracle. I've been a corporate lawyer for 40 years. I know a winning product when I see one. Forget David's settlement. We're not just going to win your divorce. We're going to build you an empire." The phone call with Samuel Thompson was the catalyst that transformed Amelia's quiet healing into a quiet revolution. Mr. Thompson, a man who had spent his life navigating the cutthroat world of corporate mergers and intellectual property, saw in Amelia's handcrafted salves something far more valuable than a simple cosmetic authenticity. "The market is saturated with chemical-filled products from faceless corporations, Amy," he explained over a crackling line. "You have a story, a real powerful story. The granddaughter, the lost recipes, the wild coastal garden. That's something you can't manufacture." He flew out to Oregon a week later. Seeing the cottage, the garden, and Amelia's makeshift lab in the kitchen, his belief was cemented. He wasn't just her lawyer anymore. He became her first investor and mentor. He helped her form an LLC file for patents on her unique formulations and trademark a name, Aura Botanica. The transition from solitary artisan to businesswoman was staggering. Amelia moved from the cottage to a small rented workshop in Portland. The first year was a blur of relentless work. She spent her days perfecting her formulas and her nights studying business management and supply chain logistics online. She learned about sourcing organic ingredients, sustainable packaging, and the labyrinthine regulations of the skincare industry. There were countless setbacks. A batch of expensive rosehip oil was lost in shipping. An early packaging supplier delivered leaky bottles. The loneliness was profound. Many nights she'd collapse into bed, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of her ambition. The ghost of David's voice whispering, "What were you going to do?" "Sell homemade potpourri at a farmer's market." But now the voice didn't sting. It fueled her. She would wake up the next morning, drink her coffee while watching the sunrise, and get back to work. Mr. Thompson connected her with a brilliant young biochemist named Dr. Aris Thorne. Aris was a skeptic at first, accustomed to sterile labs and synthetic compounds. But when he analyzed Amelia's formulations, he was stunned. "This is extraordinary," he told her, peering at a sample under a microscope. "The molecular synergy. It's not something you can just design in a lab. It's like the plants are communicating. Your grandmother was a genius." Aris helped her scale up production without sacrificing the integrity of the ingredients. He became a trusted partner, his scientific rigor complementing her intuitive botanical knowledge. Together they built Aura Botanica from the ground up. They started by selling online their first customers, drawn in by a few beauty bloggers who had discovered the miracle balm from Oregon. The growth was explosive. The story sold itself. People were tired of artifice and hungry for something real. Aura Botanica was real. Amelia, once terrified of the spotlight, reluctantly became the face of her brand. But she didn't present a polished corporate version of herself. She appeared in their marketing videos wearing a simple linen shirt, her hands smudged with dirt from the garden, talking passionately about the power of plants. She was authentic, and the world fell in love with her. Within 2 years, Aura Botanica was on the shelves of high-end department stores. Within 3, they were expanding into international markets in Europe and Asia. The small workshop became a state-of-the-art, eco-friendly facility. Amelia, the woman who had been told she had nothing, was now the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. Throughout this meteoric rise, her divorce from David dragged on. He and his lawyers, sensing her burgeoning success, changed their tactics. They were no longer offering a paltry settlement. They were demanding half of her company, claiming it was a marital asset, since she technically started experimenting while they were still legally married. Mr. Thompson shielded her from the worst of it, but the legal battle was a constant ugly shadow. David's depositions were filled with condescending claims. He painted her as an unstable hobbyist who got lucky, suggesting his initial financial support of their household was the seed money for her entire venture. Amelia refused to be distracted. She poured her energy into her work. She hired a team, delegated responsibilities, and proved to be a natural, decisive leader. The woman who once curated a perfect home now curated a thriving, ethical, and wildly successful business. On the 5th anniversary of the day she left Brooklyn, Aura Botanica was valued at over $900 million, following a massive investment from a Swiss conglomerate, Amelia Williams. The woman who had fled with nothing but a duffel bag and a broken heart was now one of the wealthiest self-made women in the country. She wasn't just a millionaire, she was on the verge of becoming a billionaire. She sat in her corner office, a sleek minimalist space with a panoramic view of the Portland skyline, and looked at the latest issue of Forbes magazine on her desk. On the cover was a photograph of her not in a power suit, but standing in a field of lavender, a serene smile on her face. The headline read, "The Natural Mogul, How Amelia Williams Turned a Lost Garden into a billion-dollar beauty empire." She ran a finger over the glossy image. She had done it. She had built a new world from the ashes of her old one. And now she felt a pull she hadn't expected. It was time to go back. Not for revenge, but for closure. It was time to face the man who had tried to erase her and show him the woman she had become. 5 years in the life of David Miller had been a slow, steady erosion. Life with Chloe was not the exhilarating escape he had imagined. The initial thrill of their clandestine affair had quickly curdled into the mundane reality of a relationship built on a foundation of deceit. Chloe was ambitious and sharp, but she lacked Amelia's warmth and intuitive kindness. Their sleek, modern apartment, a deliberate contrast to the cozy brownstone, felt cold and sterile. Professionally, David had stalled. The Hudson Yards project, which he'd believed would be his masterpiece, was plagued by budget overruns and design compromises. He had lost his spark. Without Amelia's quiet support and networking, he found himself struggling, his charm wearing thin. He and Chloe were living beyond their means, propped up by credit and the dwindling hope of a huge payout from his divorce settlement. David rarely thought of Amelia anymore. In his mind, she was a pathetic figure, probably living a meager existence somewhere, supported by the small alimony checks he begrudgingly sent. His lawyers told him she was fighting the divorce, and he interpreted it as the desperate clinging of a woman who couldn't let go. The idea that she could be thriving without him was simply inconceivable. On a grey Tuesday morning, David was in a meeting at his firm, Sterling & Vance. His boss, Jonathan Sterling, was presenting a market analysis for a new luxury spa project. The key demographic here is the affluent, wellness-conscious consumer, Sterling said, clicking to the next slide. They value authenticity, sustainability. They're buying into a lifestyle, a story. The brand that's completely cornered this market, the one we should be studying, is Aura Botanica. The name meant nothing to David. Sterling clicked again. A new slide filled the massive screen at the front of the boardroom. It was the cover of Forbes magazine. A woman stood in a field of lavender, her face serene, confident, and achingly familiar. The Natural Mogul. How Amelia Williams turned a lost garden into a billion-dollar beauty empire. A collective gasp went through the room. Heads turned to stare at David. His own world tilted on its axis. The blood drained from his face, leaving a cold, clammy sensation. It was Amelia, but it wasn't. The woman on the cover had his wife's face, but her eyes held a strength and self-possession he had never seen before. She looked powerful, untouchable. A billionaire. It was impossible. It was a joke. Amelia. Williams, one of the partners asked, looking from the screen to David. Is that your Amelia? David couldn't speak. He just stared, his mind struggling to process the information. The woman he had called boring, dependent, and ambitionless was on the cover of Forbes. The hobby he had mocked was now a billion-dollar empire. Every cruel word he had ever said to her came rushing back, each one a testament to his own staggering foolishness. The meeting ended in a blur. David stumbled back to his office in a daze. Chloe was waiting for him holding a copy of the same magazine, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. "Have you seen this?" she hissed, slamming the magazine down on his desk. $1 billion, David. $1 billion. And you've been sending her pathetic little checks while her lawyers fight you for scraps. We should have been demanding half. We still can. Her words barely registered. David was consumed by a toxic cocktail of emotions. Shock envy, and a profound, gut-wrenching sense of humiliation. He wasn't just wrong about Amelia. He had been catastrophically, spectacularly wrong. He had thrown away a diamond, believing it was a common stone. Chloe, however, saw only the money. "This changes everything," she said, her eyes gleaming with avarice. "Her company was started while you were married. Community property." "David, we can sue for half of the entire company. We could be set for life. You need to call your lawyer." Right now. The thought of Amelia's money was intoxicating. It could solve all their problems. It could give him the life of effortless luxury he felt he deserved. The humiliation began to morph into a twisted sense of entitlement. He had supported her for years. He was still her husband when she planted those first seeds. He had a right to it. "You're right," he said. The daze clearing replaced by a cold, greedy resolve. She owes me. She owes us. He picked up the phone to call his lawyer, a new strategy forming in his mind. He wouldn't be the condescending husband anymore. He would be the aggrieved party, the supportive spouse whose wife had hidden a burgeoning empire from him. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, Aura Botanica was hosting its first major East Coast event, a charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art to support environmental conservation. The guest of honor and keynote speaker was the company's reclusive founder and CEO. Amelia Williams had returned. She stood in a suite at the plaza looking out over Central Park. She was dressed in a simple, elegant, dark green gown that shimmered under the lights. Her only jewelry, a pair of delicate leaf-shaped diamond earrings. Aris Thorne stood beside her, offering a supportive smile. "Ready to face the lions?" he asked softly. Amelia took a deep breath, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "I'm not the one who should be afraid, Aris," she said, her voice calm and steady. "I'm not the prey anymore." She knew David would see the magazine. She knew he would come for her. In fact, she was counting on it. The battle wasn't just for her company anymore. It was for her story, and she was finally ready to tell it. The gala at the Met was the crown jewel of the New York social season. The air buzzed with the clinking of champagne glasses and the murmur of influential voices. Art, fashion, and finance collided under the soaring ceilings of the Temple of Dendur. But tonight, the center of this glittering universe was Amelia Williams. She moved through the crowd with an understated grace that commanded more attention than any ostentatious display of wealth ever could. She was poised, articulate, and genuinely passionate as she spoke about her company's conservation efforts. The shy, insecure woman who had hosted David's dinner parties was gone, replaced by a confident leader who looked every person she met directly in the eye. David and Chloe arrived uninvited. Chloe had secured tickets through a contact, her determination fueled by a desperate greed. She wore a tight, sequined dress that was slightly too loud for the elegant affair, while David looked uncomfortable in his tuxedo, a man out of his depth. They stood in the shadows of a towering Egyptian statue, watching Amelia from afar. For David, seeing her in person was a far more visceral shock than seeing her on a magazine cover. She radiated a calm power that was both captivating and infuriating. This was the woman he had discarded. This was the life, the adoration, the respect, the success that he felt should have been his. "Look at her," Chloe whispered venomously, her nails digging into his arm. "Playing the queen. This is our money, David. Our life. You need to go over there, confront her. Don't let her get away with this." Driven by Chloe's relentless pushing and his own bruised ego, David began to cross the floor. Heads turned as he approached the circle of people surrounding Amelia. A hush fell over the group as he stopped directly in front of her. Amelia didn't look surprised. She simply finished her sentence, excused herself from the conversation with a polite smile, and turned to face him. Her expression was perfectly neutral, revealing nothing. "David," she said, her voice as smooth and cool as river stone. "This is an unexpected surprise." "Amelia, we need to talk," he said, trying to sound firm, but coming across as merely desperate. "What you've done, hiding all of this from me while we're still married, it's fraud." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Amelia's lips. "Is it? I seem to recall you being intimately aware of my hobby, as you called it. You found it quite boring, if I remember correctly." The quiet accuracy of her words hit him like a physical blow. He glanced around, realizing they were drawing an audience. He lowered his voice. "This isn't the place. But don't think for a second you can cut me out. My lawyers will be in touch. We were married. I am entitled to half of everything." It was at that moment that Chloe, unable to contain herself, strode forward and stood beside David, a caricature of the supportive partner. "She's right, Amelia. You owe him. He supported you when you were nothing." Amelia's gaze flickered to Chloe, a look of mild curiosity, as if observing an interesting but irrelevant species of insect. Then her eyes returned to David, and for the first time they turned icy cold. "Let me be perfectly clear, David," she said, her voice dropping but losing none of its power. "You are entitled to nothing. The man I was married to declared to my face that I was ambitionless and worthless. He made his choice. He chose to build his future with this woman." She gave Chloe a dismissive glance. "The assets you're trying to claim were not built from our marriage. They were built from its ashes. Ashes you created." She took a small step closer, forcing him to meet her gaze. "You didn't invest in my company. You didn't believe in me. You abandoned me. The only thing you are entitled to is the memory of your own colossal misjudgment. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a gala to host." She turned her back on them, a simple, devastatingly final gesture. Two discreet but imposing security guards materialized, flanking David and Chloe. "Sir." "Madam, I believe you are ready to leave," one of them said quietly but firmly. Humiliation washed over David in a hot wave. They were being escorted out like common gate crashers. As they were steered toward the exit, the crowd parted their faces, a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. David caught one last glimpse of Amelia. She was laughing with a group of people, Dr. Aris Thorne at her side, her back straight, her head held high. She hadn't even watched them leave. To her, they were already gone. Outside on the cold stone steps of the Met, the reality of their situation crashed down on them. The illusion of a quick, massive payday had been shattered. They had been dismissed effortlessly and absolutely. "Don't you worry," Chloe seethed, her face twisted with rage. "This isn't over. There are other ways. We will find some piece of leverage. We will make her pay." But David barely heard her. He was staring at the lights of the city, haunted by the image of the woman he had so casually destroyed, and the queen she had become in his absence. He had made the biggest mistake of his life, and he was only just beginning to understand its true cost. The confrontation at the gala was not an end, but the opening salvo in a war David was determined to win. Publicly humiliated and privately seething, he saw Amelia's newfound strength as the ultimate betrayal. Fueled by Chloe's relentless avarice and his own cavernous insecurity, he weaponized the law. His legal team, a pack of notoriously aggressive sharks from a top Manhattan firm, launched a full-scale assault. They filed a blizzard of motions, attempting to portray Amelia as a cunning manipulator who had siphoned marital funds to secretly build her empire, all while playing the part of the devoted wife. They demanded access to every email, every financial statement, every note from Aura Botanica's inception, convinced they could construct a narrative that entitled David to half of his wife's billion-dollar fortune. From her suite in New York, Amelia watched the storm gather, but she felt no fear. She felt a cold, clear focus. This was the final ugly remnant of her old life, and it needed to be purged. While David's team was generating headlines, Mr. Thompson's was operating in the shadows. He had assembled a discreet team of the best forensic accountants in the country, men and women who could find a single fraudulent digit in a mountain of data. "He's arrogant, Amelia," Mr. Thompson had told her. His voice grim but steady. "And arrogant men who cheat in one part of their life rarely have the discipline to stay clean in another. They believe they are untouchable. We just need to find the one lie he thought he buried deep enough." They found it. Not one lie, but a web of them intricately woven into the very fabric of David's magnum opus, the Hudson Yards Project. It was a masterpiece of deception. The accountants uncovered a series of shell corporations registered in Delaware, used to bill the project for non-existent consulting fees. They traced those fees back to an offshore account controlled by David. They found evidence of collusion with a primary materials supplier, where David had signed off on lower-grade structural steel and pocketed a substantial kickback, compromising the integrity of the building itself. The paper trail was undeniable, a damning chronicle of greed that had started years before Amelia had even packed her bag. He hadn't just been stealing from his partners. He had been endangering the public for personal gain. When Mr. Thompson presented the findings bound in a simple but heavy black binder, Amelia felt a profound sense of sadness. It was the final definitive proof that the man she had loved was a complete illusion. There was a temptation, a dark and seductive whisper in her mind, to release it all, to call the district attorney to leak it to the New York Times, and to watch the empire of David Miller burn to the ground. Aris Thorne, who had been her rock through the ordeal, saw the conflict in her eyes. "Whatever you decide," he said, placing a hand gently on her shoulder, "it should be the decision that sets you free." His words clarified everything. Revenge was a chain, not a key. It would tie her to David's fate, forcing her to watch his trial, to read his name in the headlines for years to come. Freedom was a clean cut, a final silent severing. "We won't leak it," she announced, her voice resonating with newfound certainty. "We will use it to buy my peace. That's more valuable than any revenge." The final settlement meeting was scheduled at Mr. Walt Thompson's office, a place that felt like a bastion of old-world integrity. Its walls were metal-lined with leather-bound legal texts, and the air smelled of wood polish and history. David and Chloe arrived looking polished and triumphant. They had just won a minor procedural motion in court, and they strode in with the smug assurance of victors, believing Amelia had been summoned to surrender. Their lawyer, a slick man named Marcus Thorne, spread his files out on the vast mahogany desk as if he owned the room. "All right, Samuel," Marcus began, addressing Mr. Thompson with practiced condescension. "I assume we're here to finally discuss a realistic settlement figure. My client is prepared to be generous, but the clock is ticking." David leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. He looked at Amelia, expecting to see a woman on the verge of collapse. Instead, he saw only a deep, unnerving calm. She hadn't said a word, her hands resting peacefully in her lap. "Before we discuss figures, Marcus," Mr. Thompson said, his tone dangerously mild, "my client has one final piece of discovery to share. We felt it was more appropriate to present it here rather than in open court." With a slow, deliberate movement, he slid the heavy black binder across the polished surface of the desk. It landed in front of Marcus with a soft, definitive thud. "What's this?" Marcus asked, annoyed by the theatricality. "More sob stories about your client's garden." "Open it," Amelia said. It was the first time she had spoken, and her voice cut through the room clear and sharp as glass. Marcus sighed and opened the binder. The first page was a summary of findings. He read it, his eyebrows arching in amusement. He turned the page to a complex flow chart of bank transfers. His amusement faded. He flipped again and again, his eyes scanning financial statements, copies of falsified invoices, and sworn affidavits from a disgruntled former employee of the contracting firm. The color drained from his face. He began to sweat, his slick confidence melting away under the fluorescent lights. He looked up from the binder, no longer at Mr. Thompson, but at David, his expression a mixture of horror and accusation. David, seeing his lawyer's reaction, felt the first prickle of genuine fear. "What is it? It's a bluff." "Is it, David?" Chloe snapped, her voice tight with anxiety. "What did you do?" Amelia finally stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the people moving through Bryant Park below. "What he did," she said, her back to them, "was build his career on a foundation of lies. Not just the personal ones, he told me, but professional ones that constitute multiple felonies. Fraud, embezzlement, racketeering. The kind of crimes that don't just end a career, but result in long, unpleasant prison sentences." She turned back to face them. Her eyes were devoid of hatred or anger. They held only a vast, weary finality. "That binder contains everything the U.S. Attorney's Office would need to secure a conviction. Given that the fraud began while we were still married, his legal team would no doubt try to implicate me. It would be a messy, public, and mutually destructive process." She walked back to the desk and placed her palms flat on the wood. Or we can choose a different path, right here, right now. She slid a single document and a pen across the desk. This is a divorce settlement. It stipulates that you will drop every single claim against me and my company, effective immediately. You will renounce any right to spousal support. You will walk away with the assets you acquired in your own name and all the debts that come with them. You will sign this, and in return, that binder gets placed in a vault. As long as you and Miss Vance here disappear from my life permanently and completely, it will remain there. The moment you violate that, a copy will be delivered to the authorities. The choice is yours, a clean break or total annihilation. The silence in the room was absolute. Chloe stared at the binder as if it were a venomous snake. The future she had fantasized about, the yachts, the mansions, the endless river of Amelia's money, had vanished, replaced by the terrifying image of visiting David in a prison jumpsuit. David stared at Amelia, his mind finally painfully grasping the full scale of his miscalculation. He had seen her as a soft, sentimental creature he could easily crush. He had never imagined she possessed this kind of steely, strategic brilliance. She hadn't come to fight him on his terms. She had changed the entire game. His lawyer, Marcus, quietly cleared his throat. "Sign the paper, David." With a trembling hand, David reached for the pen. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the hollowed-out look of a man who had lost everything. As the nib scratched across the paper, the sound was deafening. It was the sound of his final surrender, the signing away of his last desperate claim on her. He pushed the document back, unable to meet her eyes. Amelia nodded curtly to Mr. Thompson. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the office. She didn't look back. Down on the street, the crisp autumn air felt like the first breath of a new life. The weight that she had carried for 5 years, the grief, the anger, the struggle, the fight had finally lifted. She was free. Her life after that day unfolded with a quiet, beautiful purpose. Aura Botanica thrived, becoming a global symbol of ethical business and natural integrity. But Amelia's focus had shifted from balance sheets to wild landscapes. She poured her energy and wealth into the Aura Botanica Foundation, acquiring and rewilding vast tracts of land, protecting endangered ecosystems. Her partnership with Aris grew from a shared passion for science into a deep, abiding love built on a foundation of trust and mutual admiration. They were a team in the lab and in life. Occasionally she would hear whispers about David. His career had imploded under a cloud of rumors and a quiet internal investigation at his firm. He and Chloe had split acrimoniously, their relationship unable to survive the death of their shared financial dream. He lived in the shadow of what he had done forever, glancing over his shoulder, a prisoner not of the state, but of the secrets only he and Amelia knew. Amelia, however, rarely thought of him. Her world was filled with the scent of damp earth after a rain, the excitement of a new botanical discovery, and the warmth of Aris's hand in hers. One evening, years later, she was walking through the restored gardens of her grandmother's cottage on the Oregon coast, the place where her new life had begun. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of rose and gold. She knelt down, her hands sinking into the rich soil, the same soil that had healed her and given her a future. She had taken the ugliest betrayal and cultivated from it a life of extraordinary beauty. Her greatest success wasn't the billion-dollar empire. It was this peace, this strength, this profound, unshakable sense of self. She was finally and completely home. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that our lowest moments do not have to define us. Betrayal can feel like the end of the world, a deep wound that seems impossible to heal. But within that pain, there is often an undiscovered strength, a resilience we never knew we possessed. She didn't seek revenge in the traditional sense. Her victory was in building a life so full, so successful, and so authentic that the man who broke her became nothing more than a footnote in her incredible story. She found her worth not in a man's approval, but in the soil of her own garden, in the challenges of building a business, and in the quiet confidence of her own capabilities. Her ultimate success wasn't the money, it was her freedom. If this story of resilience, transformation, and ultimate triumph moved you, please take a moment to hit that like button. It truly helps our channel grow. Share this story with someone who might need to hear that it's possible to rebuild from the ashes. And most importantly, if you want more real-life dramas that will inspire and captivate you, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for listening.